Hi, everyone. Can I get your attention? We're going to get started. Hello. Welcome. I'm Whitney Warren from the Graduate School of Education, where I'm studying education policy. And I'm pleased to welcome you to the Center for International Development's Friday Speaker Series. Um, we are going to be doing a fantastic talk today entitled A Cross-Sectoral Approach to Policymaking, How Consejo Nuevo León model works to support sustainable development. The format for today's session will be a 25 to 35-minute presentation and then around 20 minutes for Q&A. Before we get started, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping items. Given that this is a hybrid event, we will be asking questions from both in-person and virtual audiences. I'll be walking around with the mic for in-person questions, and a CID faculty member will be getting the questions from online. As we're recording today's session, I do want to let you know that the camera will be focused just on the speaker at the front. So if you choose to ask a question, your voice will be recorded, but your face will be not. I saw everyone checking in with the QR code, but if you have not, please make sure you do that on your way out just to help us keep track of attendance and plan for future events. If you are not yet subscribed to the CID newsletter, please do so to learn more about weekly offerings. Our next event will be on Monday, April 10th from 1 to 2 with Pranab Barnan, Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Economics at the Department of Economics at the University of California, Berkeley, who will discuss his new book, A World of Insecurity, Democratic Disenchantment in Rich and Poor Countries. HCAS Professor Danny Roddick will moderate the discussion. So, without further ado, I'd like to briefly introduce our speaker for today, Ana Fernanda Ibera Barba. Ana Fernanda is a specialist in strategic planning as well as public policy design and evaluation. She's the technical secretary of Consejo Nuevo León, an advisory council to the government of Nuevo León, mandated by the state to define the long-term state strategic plan. With over 15 years of experience, she has collaborated in research, design, and implementation of regional and international projects, working with organizations such as the European Commission, UNFAO, as well as representatives of over 18 countries. Under her leadership in 2020, Consejo Nuevo León received the United Nations Public Service Award for promoting integrated mechanisms for sustainable development. Consejo has been awarded the IDB's 2021 award for first place in subnational governments. Ana Fernanda holds a master's degree in public policy and administration from CIDE, where she focused on city policies at Sciences Po Bejares. She has a bachelor's degree in political science from Monterey Tech, where she was her class valedictorian. She's a feminist and a founding member of two nonprofits, Auna Mexico y Mujeres Más Mujeres, which focus on promoting women's participation in politics and public discourse with gender perspectives. Thank you for joining us today, Ana Fernanda. Over to you.
Thank you. Hi. Thank you for having me here. I'm very happy to be here. Very honored as well. So I'm going to talk to you about a state in Mexico that's called Nuevo León. Nuevo León is right there. It's a 2-hour drive to the United States, very close to Texas on the northeastern part of Mexico. And a few facts. We have second largest metropolitan area in Mexico, 5.7 million, more or less. We have the highest GDP per capita in Mexico, which is 2 times the national average. We have the 3rd largest economy with the 7th largest population. So we're talking about 8% of national GDP. And we are the largest recipient of foreign direct investment, about 30% of the total in the country. And more of all, with the nearshoring wave that's happening right now in North America, we're expected to receive 50% of all the nearshoring investment in Mexico. So it's a booming economy, it's a booming state, and this presents a lot of opportunities and also a lot of challenges to what we do. And I want to talk about a bit of our past to give you a perspective of why I'm bringing this up. First, this is our metropolitan area, and this is our most famous landmark, Cerro de la Silla. It's very pretty. We're called the City of the Mountains if you ever want to go. Really nice. So in 2010, we had 2 unexpected crises that hit us as our community. First, we had a security crisis. The drug dealing crisis was really aggravated in this time. We had a lot of insecurity people were feeling, and daily events were occurring in the city that made us think that everybody was in danger, and the Hurricane Alex. We were hit at the same time by one of the largest hurricanes that basically destroyed our urban infrastructure in the metropolitan area. So what happened? The government was overwhelmed by it, and it just was suddenly out of resources and suddenly out of ways to solve these two crises happen at the same time. So what happened? The way we actually worked to overcome this crisis was to bring civil society and the private sector together to help government. What happened? In terms of security, a large group of companies and a large group of NGOs got together and financed the design of the new police. So basically, they got together people from human resources, people from intelligence and security, people from quality control, and even marketing specialists. And together, they designed the new state police. This state police became known as Fuerza Civil, and they funded it for about 10 years, right? The second thing that happened was that with the Hurricane Alex, we had two different parties in the federal government and in the state government, and they couldn't agree on how to use the resources to rebuild the infrastructure that was destroyed with the hurricane. So what happened was that these NGOs and the private sector got together and hired one financial officer and one project manager, and they put them there in service so that they could ensure the federal government that the money was going to be used properly, and to make sure to the state government that the money was going to get to the state and that the state wouldn't have to pay for everything in reconstructing the infrastructure. So this led to two results. One, the country's best ranked state police. And second, new infrastructure built in time and with budget savings. There was a problem though. We built the same thing. So we lacked a common vision. So the first thing I want to tell you is, one, this was extraordinary. I mean, having the help of private sector and civil society into solving deep problems of the state was very helpful. The thing is, we ended up building the same things we had before, sort of. So we didn't change, and we didn't take this opportunity as it could have been taken to imagine a new future, right? So what did this crisis teach us? First, this, that we can, as different actors, get involved in public issues. Second, how can we get ahead of this crisis? That's the question that Consejo Nuevo León is trying to answer. How do we prevent this and use all this knowledge that is outside in these different sectors to prevent, to plan, and to actually innovate towards it, and define in result the future we want for the state. So that's how Consejo Nuevo León was built. We have two main purposes. The first one, to provide a long-term vision and the strategic objectives to get there for the state. And second, to ensure that these policies that we help get become a reality together, that they stay in place despite the political changes we have. We change government every 6 years, and in Mexico, that usually means that the new government comes, destroys everything, changes every single program, and you have to start over. Consejo Nuevo León was built also to make sure that these small triumphs from civil society can actually be kept there and ensure that they transcend political cycles. I will add a third one in the conclusions that has come as an outcome that we didn't plan for, but that has been happening lately. And that, well, I'm gonna say it now. We're also becoming kind of a library for future governments, right? So whenever a new government comes, we're able to tell them, oh, don't even think about creating a spaceship. We already know that this type of spaceship doesn't work. This one is the one we were working on the previous government. We already know that this works, this doesn't work. So start building from there. How do we do that? We use collective intelligence. We are a model of open government, and we have a specialized team on policy research and analysis. We bring together the academia, the private sector, civil society, and government to work together. Let me tell you why. In Mexico, as I'm sure in many of the countries you represent, civil society usually engages with government on the demand side, right? Protesting, having NGOs that demand different type of laws, different type of policies, and they do it not necessarily in a collaborative way. What we decided to bring to the table was a new actor that actually is saying, I don't want to be on the streets. I'm not going to be demanding. Those are very good. There are very good actors doing that already that are pushing forward our boundaries and our frontiers of what we should be thinking about in terms of rights, in terms of law, right? But we need to have someone that sits down and works together with government to try to solve issues. So we do it in a collaborative area. And that is new for, I would say, even Mexico, not only for Nuevo León. We have three main functions. Well, let me go back and say that we were created by law in 2014 as a hybrid organization. We are neither a governmental office nor are we an NGO. We're both. We're mixedly funded. We're funded by the private donors and we're funded by government, 50% and 50%. And we exist in a kind of limbo, which puts us at the closest definition to what we are is a quango, a quasi non-governmental organization. And what we do is we have certain functions by law, but we are not public officials. We work with public officials and we bring together everyone in society to try to solve public issues together, right? So we have three main functions. One, long-term planning. This basically translates usually into one document, which is the long-term plan for the state. I'm going to talk about it a bit more, a little bit ahead in talk. But this document contains the vision for the future, our strategic objectives, and how to get there. And by law, this plan is supposed to be the foundation of each government's plans as well, both for the state and for the municipalities. This plan is meant to be for 15 or 20 years, depends when we make them. And we create it in a collective process as well. The second function we have is providing the state with strategic policy projects. I'm going to get into that a bit more ahead. And the third one is we do policy monitoring and evaluation. So we do those three things constantly. We are structured this way. We have a double presidency. The governor is our president, but we also have someone from civil society as a president. Actually, he's a Harvard alumni, Jesus Viejo. So they're together there in the top. And then we have representatives from the federal government, one of them. From the state level, we have the president of the legislative branch, the president of the judicial branch, and 3 secretaries from the executive branch. We have 4 university deans, the top universities in Nuevo León. And then we have 9 committees. Each of these committees is led by a social leader and the top government official of that branch. For example, the public finance committee is led by the treasurer of the state, okay, and with an expert in public finance and pensions. And then we have the technical secretary, me, and a support team. This support team, it says support team, but actually they're fabulous. They're an 18 people team. They're all policy analysts. They're brilliant and they're specialized in each of the topics we cover in Consejo Nuevo León. So this is the basic structure. And we deal with these 9 topics: public finance, effective government and transparency, economic development, sustainable development, social development, health, education, arts and culture, and security and justice. Each of these commissions is led by those 2 people that I told you, one from civil society and one from government. So for example, in education, we have the Dean of Inclusion, Sustainable Development, and Gender Issues at one of the most prestigious universities in Latin America, Tec de Monterrey. And we have the Education Secretary of the state. In social development, we have the leader of a very, very famous NGO in Nuevo León, along with the Secretary of Inclusion. In sustainable development, we have an architect that specializes in development on sustainable development, and we have the leader of mobility of the state. So we have all these partnerships, and then the 2 of them usually invite specialists from academia, from civil society, from the private sector and government to come together. Each of these committee is constituted by about 20 people, and these 20 people each year decide to work on one or two topics that are aligned to our strategic plan. And then what we do is we try to, well, yeah, bring together some policy proposals for the state government. So I'm going to give you some examples later, but what we usually do is we go to the state secretary and we say, all right, so the strategic plan has, for example, in sustainable development, four main objectives, right? One has to do with climate change, the other one has to do with urban development, the third one has to do with mobility, and the fourth one with natural resources. Which ones are your priority? Well, let's say mobility. All right. So on mobility, we think that we can bring you some ideas on, for example, and this is a real example, we need to have a tool that helps us measure what does a new investment in mobility does to the whole mobility network in the state. As I said, we're Mexico's second largest metropolitan area. That means we have like one city that concentrates 90% of the state population, 90% of the jobs, and 90% of the companies of the state, right? All of it in 7% of the state's territory. It's super concentrated. So every single thing you do in terms of if a big factory comes in, or if a big set of buildings is set for people to live in a certain part of the city, that completely alters the mobility scheme of the city, right? So whenever you think about bringing a new metro, for example, a new metro line, then where do you put it and what does it do to the entire system? We're building a tool to understand those changes. We're doing it with another university and with, well, one Mexican university and with one Canadian university. So that's going to be a project that we're going to bring to the mobility secretary in about a year. So those are the projects we do. And whenever we want to bring something forward, the government has to say, okay, I'm interested, I like it. And it has to put some resources as well, so we can work together to bring a solution to a common problem. And what our specialists do in each of our commissions is to always bring forward their expertise, to give advice, to follow up on the projects. I'm going to give you another small example. Last year, the federal government was trying to centralize the health system. Right now in Mexico, we're a federal government. I should have started with that. We're a federal government, so each state has, as the U.S., has certain functions that are, properly to the state, and health used to be one of those. But the new federal government is trying to re-centralize everything. So our experts in our health committee prepared a policy paper to help the new health secretary take a position on the issue. So we basically built it with our experts, and she used it on her conversations with the president to try to sort out what the position of Nuevo León would be in terms of the recentralization of the health system. So those kind of things are really cool and actually kind of, I wouldn't say easy, but very feasible that we can do it for the state with top knowledge, right? So to give you an example of what we do, last year, we did 40 policy projects. We monitor about 450 indicators for the state. We have this really beautiful webpage for it. If you want to take a look into it, I'll give you the address. But it's become so useful because we compare Nuevo León to all the other 31 states in the country that other state governments are using our webpage because we keep it updated all the time and we give out a big branch of indicators so that people can monitor them. We have over 3,000 experts volunteering their time and expertise every day in these 9 committees. And we have 18 policy specialists, which are like the muscle of Consejo Nuevo León, and they're brilliant. I'm going to give you 3 proper examples of what we do. First, we worked on the public pension system. Let me give you a bit of context. Nuevo León had this thing where, and it happened in all Latin America, where public pensions changed from being this, the traditional system where the young ones fund the old ones, on a kind of like, they call it solidarity mechanism, and they change it to individual accounts. So when you have an individual account, what happens is that you work for yourself and you save a little, right? And at the end of your working life, you get it as a pension. But the problem was the gap between one generation and the other. And the other problem was that the ones that were having their individual accounts they were saving very, very little money. So they would end up having monthly pensions of the equivalent of $25. They were super low. I mean, incredibly low. No one can live on $25 a month. So the treasurer came and asked for our help. So we hired this incredible group of um, financial experts, and we projected the policy forward like 40 years and 20 years, and we saw different scenarios, and we came up with a strategy to go back to the solidarity scheme, but with changes. And to make the story short, we were able to propose a new law. This law was passed, and every year we're saving the state about the equivalent to 400 million US dollars to the public, budget. And we didn't do it by ourselves, but I mean, we designed it and then we gave it to the treasurer and he enforced it. And this is working, and people are getting better pensions, and we're saving the state some money as well. So this is one of our big successes. A second example I'm going to give you is a more of an academic kind of project we did. Probably you all know what social mobility is, right? Is the how your life is and how many opportunities you have to improve the way your life is from the moment you were born till the moment you die, right? And this is usually thought about in terms of steps on a ladder. So in Nuevo León, we did the first subnational research to understand what factors were more important in facilitating or limiting your opportunities to improve your position in the ladder. We measured gender, we measured skin color, we measured the place you live in the state, whether your parents' education was, higher education or not, what's your education, and also if you describe yourself as coming from a community of indigenous cultures. So what we found was that 40% of the people that are born in Nuevo León on the lower step of the ladder will stay there no matter what, and the rest will move up, which actually gives us a very good panoramic given the Mexican conditions. But we found that for women particularly, if they have access to care systems, like maternity leave, um, to not become care providers without having income, to having access to childcare, to having access for um, older people having access to certain social security infrastructure and services, that increases 10 points the chances that women have from getting to the lowest step in the ladder to the highest one. 10%. That's like, it's a lot. So that clearly can translate into policy, right? That actually has pushed forward many initiatives in the state right now to try to build a care system because of these findings. Because we now know that this is significantly important in terms of promoting equality and promoting inclusion. So this is another example, yeah. The third example I'm going to give you is on the economy side. Nuevo León, as I said, is the recipient of foreign direct investment. And in Mexico, there used to exist an official agency at the federal government called ProMéxico. And this agency was in charge of going abroad, and saying, Mexico's fantastic, come invest in us, travel to Mexico, we're great. And then the new federal government was not so new anymore. They started in 2021, disappeared it. So what happened was that the states that still thought that they needed foreign direct investment were not able to promote themselves. And they didn't have enough money to go abroad and go to all the export fairs like the Hanover Fair and the whichever famous, foreign direct investment fair you can have in the world. So what happened was that in Consejo Nuevo León, we designed a local agency. It's actually an NGO. And this NGO gathers business chambers, economic clusters, big companies, universities together. And they fund this agency so that they can promote Nuevo León all over the world. We're known for our main capital, well, for our capital, Monterrey. But so this NGO is called Invest Monterrey, and it goes abroad promoting Nuevo León to the world, and it has been incredibly successful. They give services such as, going to fairs, but also helping investors land in Nuevo León and providing information on every single sector in the economy. And so this has worked brilliantly. And it's become a national model of how to help the economy bring more investment to the state. So these are three big examples. Please interrupt me if you have any questions. Or are we supposed to wait until the end? Okay, we're supposed to wait until the end. And the last example I want to give you is something we're doing right now. It's the second time we're doing it. As I said, our main task is to bring forward a proposal of how the state is going to be in the future. This is called the state strategic plan. And right now, we're meant to update it to 2040. So how do we do this? Usually when you're in Mexico and you're used to planning is usually done in a government office. 3 people do it. And at the end, they just give you a document to read it for 5 days. And if you like it, you can vote yes. And if you don't like it, you can vote no. And nobody ever goes to those consultations and they just pass. So nobody knows what these plans contain. So what we've done is we changed the whole process for it. We have 5 different moments in which people can take part in building this plan. First, we start with a huge poll. We poll all the state with statistical representation of the different regions of the state. And we ask, what do they think it's a priority in terms of public problems? How do they evaluate the performance of government so far? And third, what would Nuevo León be in 2040 if it was an ideal place to live in, right? So those 3 responses, we use them as a basis for prioritizing our diagnosis. Then we updated the diagnosis of the state on those 9 topics that I said before. Our 9 committees, they translate into 9 topics. After that, we programmed some workshops with our commissions, with our 300 experts, to try to envision what each of these commissions would look like in 2040, not the commissions, but the topic. So if you have to think about the future of finance in Nuevo León in 2040, what's that going to be like? If you have to think about the future of education, what's that going to be like? And we created an aspiration to 2040 for each of those 9 topics. Then we took a look at our strategic objectives and said, well, some of them needed updating and some of them have to be actually done from scratch because there were topics in our previous plan that we didn't cover. For example, when we finished our previous plan, COVID hadn't hit us. So COVID came and changed all the health sector, the education sector, the economic sector. So we had to review those objectives. The second thing that happened was nearshoring. Nearshoring wasn't even close to being on the mind of everyone when we did our previous edition of the plan. So we now have to bring this into account when trying to think of the future. So we're updating all those by doing some collective intelligence workshops where we brought specialists. It took us over 1,300 hours of donated time by our specialists to trying to rephrase and rethink these objectives. And we brought people from over 68 organizations all over the country to work on this. Once we had those objectives, we prepared a first draft. And this draft, we opened it last week so the public can read it, comment, and give us some suggestions. It's like a massive Google Doc. You can actually go into it and you can give us an opinion because it's open to everyone. We created a platform called participa.conl.mx. And in it, you can see every single part of the plan. You can read it. And with that, what we're going to do is we're going to do some edits to the plan. But what I'm saying is that we're actually co-creating the plan. Of course, every single comment we have, we read it and we evaluate it whether or not it's pertinent, whether or not it's relevant, whether or not it's factual. Factual is a very important thing when we're trying to read those comments. And after that, we do some edits. This is the second time we do this process. The last time we did it, we received over 1,500 comments. And we received institutional positions from 30 organizations in the state, 30. All the universities, all the business chambers, all the political parties, international NGOs such as UN Habitat, such as UNHCR, We received political positions from the presidential office of the Agenda 2030. So we gather all that knowledge. And for example, in the chapter of sustainable development, we had a proposal. And with this process, we completely changed it. We had to redo the whole chapter because they gave us some really important information that made us, just redo the chapter. So we take these processes very seriously, and they're very helpful, and we've been awarded for it. So it's really exciting to have this, and we're doing that process right now. After we finish this process of opening the plan to everyone, we're going to have one last consultation, and that is we build the indicators to measure the progress of our strategic objectives in time. We build them collectively as well. What we do is we have a platform that uses collective intelligence. And in this platform, if you're a specialist in economics and statistics, we will give you our strategic objectives, for example, for how SMEs are supposed to be growing in the future. And so we give you 4 or 5 indicators as options. For example, I'll tell you, we need to measure whether or not our SMEs are gaining capacity to stay alive past their average, which is usually 2 years in Mexico. So we're going to give you GDP per capita. We're going to give you the number of SMEs that exist in Mexico. We're going to give you like 3 or 4 indicators, and we give them to 4 or 5 specialists, and they give us their opinion. You know, this indicator sucks. Nobody uses it anymore. Nobody's measuring it. Or this indicator is great, but nobody actually gives you the information and you're going to be able to compare it. Or this indicator is perfect. Or here's a new suggestion of the indicator we're going to use. Last time we did this process, we started the process with 250 indicators. And when we finished, we had received another 250 suggestions of indicators. So that built our current base of 450 indicators that we measure. It's amazing what you can do when you open yourself up to asking questions to specialists. We get so much useful information that is provided in service of our state. It's just brilliant. So we do this, and then there's a second phase to this process. Okay, we chose, for example, if we're trying to measure employment and whether or not it's good employment. So we measure the formal employment because that's important because you get Social Security, right? So we use that indicator. And so we ask our specialists, okay, so what should we aim for in 2040? Help us establish a goal because we need to think how we want to be in 2040. So we do that again collectively with specialists who know and can tell you, well, you know, if you compare Nuevo León to the rest of the country, you're already first place. So that's not enough, right? What if we compare ourselves to the OECD? Okay, that works. So we compare ourselves with the average of OECD, and that becomes our goal, for example. Or you know what? No, you need to pay attention to the law. The law says that at least, for example, in terms of investment in science and technology, we should be investing at least 1% of our GDP. No state in Mexico is doing that. So we should aim for that. That's our minimum. But guess what? OECD average is 3.5%. All right, then we're going to put the minimum base on 1% and 3.5% as our goal, like our optimal goal, right? So we have those ranges, and that's how we measure the whole state by. And these goals are, we provide an annual report to the governor who can see the progress on each of these strategic objectives that were collectively built by all these specialists and common people. So we're very proud of this process. We're the only state in Mexico that is doing something similar. And it has helped us in many ways because it's not only a process that helps legitimize the objectives we have for the future, but that also has increased the knowledge we have of our own state and of our government. And third, it has helped build trust between government and just the community. So we've received a few awards for our work. We received the UN Public Service Award. We received just some awards that have to do with our platforms, our methodologies, the way we work, and the way we are integrated as a sustainable development mechanism. So what are our challenges? Because not everything's perfect. I would say that in the past we faced two important challenges. The first is building trust. And by building trust, I'm referring to the fact that government is not used to listening to everyday people or to specialists and actually say, okay, thank you, you want to help me, that's fantastic. They're not used to that. And we have to do it, we've had to do it by creating even, specialized environments, like where we meet and what do we do afterwards and how we don't ever post anything on social networks regarding our meetings, right? Because we are creating like a trust environment, a secure environment. But there's also the other way around. I don't know if you know how many people trust government in Latin America. Take a guess. How many, like, what percentage of the population say, I trust my government? No, not zero. That would be close, but not zero. What? Did anyone say 20%? Yeah, more or less, 20%. Honestly, nobody trusts government. I don't know how they can stay. I mean, sorry, I'm being recorded, but 20%, that's crazy. So how do we build trust? It's not going to be with the regular elections. We've had elections in Latin America for the past, well, some countries like ours apparently had elections for over 90 years so far, but honestly, only 20. 20 were real. The other ones weren't real. So it's hard. It's hard, and we know. I'm sure you know that a lot of public officials do good work, and they're trying their best every single day. Have some of you been public officials before? Like I've been, yeah. And it's exhausting, right? It's a very demanding job. You have to work like 12, 13 hours a day, and people always think you're corrupt everywhere you go. That's the standard. So how do you build trust? Well, by opening your doors, that's one thing. Second, listening to people. And third, by showing what you need and showing what you know. And the funny thing that has happened with these interactions we have with government officials is that they actually sit down and they are heard by the private sector, by the academia, and by civil society. Sometimes these actors that are, in the ecosystem, even though they demand a lot from government, they don't really know how government works, or they don't know the limitations they have on an everyday basis, and how even though you work a lot, you don't get much done. Not because you don't want to, that's what I'm saying. So this has helped understand the limited capacities government has in terms of technology, in terms of resources, in terms of human power. And on the other hand, it has also helped government learn that it can find some of those answers outside and get it for free or get it for very low prices. What I'm saying is that there's a collective investment in better policies in what we do. And that's just, I think, the best thing we've got, but it's been a slow process to build. The second challenge we had is making it through an election. Because, yeah, we were created by law, but as any Mexican here would know, that doesn't mean much. It means we can be erased on the next government, right? So we've survived 2 government changes, and it's actually been really interesting because this is our 3rd government we're working with, and they're very different, and it demands of us to adapt to new forms of, government dynamics, but it has also allowed us to help the new coming government to do the transition quicker. Why? Because we have a lot of information, so we can facilitate the process of coming in and settling in into their new roles. And that has been useful. And I think all political parties in Nuevo León right now, come in the next election, which will be in 2027, we're not worried that we're going to stay. I think we are going to stay because we've proven ourselves useful. And that's something that it doesn't really happen that much. So what are our present challenges? Well, managing the demand. We have become useful, and I will tell you what happens as well. Some state secretaries have found that by having Consejo Nuevo León support, things get a better acceptance both in public and in government itself. So we're getting a lot of demands for for projects. And we're only 18 people, so we're over our heads right now. So that has been a question that we're addressing right now. How do you choose which policies to prioritize versus others that you have to just let go? Second, how to strengthen our organization. In terms of the 18 people that work there, as I said before, we're in limbo. We're neither public officials nor are we part of an NGO. So we ourselves have been trying to work on how to strengthen and formalize our institution. And the third one is working with municipalities. In Nuevo León, there are 51 municipalities, 13 of them in the metropolitan area. And there are issues like air, having clean air, which you cannot solve only working with state government. You need to get the municipalities involved. But we don't have the manpower or the labor force, to not be gender biased, to work on these issues as we probably should if we want to have, proper, giving proper advice to all municipalities. So this is challenging. We just started one project with one municipality to see how it goes. But our idea is, or our question right now is, how do we become a better institution without becoming a gigantic institution that then will have to be, funded by whom? So we're trying to sort that question out right now. These are our challenges so far. I'm about to finish. So my key takeaways that I want to share with you as a conclusion of our experiment. Let me say, we were an experiment 5 years ago. Right now, I would say we're a policy innovation. We're not an experiment anymore because we survived. But still, it's interesting because we're learning every day from what we do. And first is we know this, but we don't really accept it. And governments do really need society's help. And when both sides recognize it, we can work together in very productive ways. Second thing is that really building government capacities is a good bet when you do it with good knowledge and openly, and it really can help address complex policy issues. Honestly, we are not trying to substitute government. That's one of the main things we want to say. We do policy research, we do policy evaluation, we do not do policy implementation. Why? Because government exists for a reason. And government itself has many capabilities that just need strengthening. But if we do it together, then we can have, a better, better government. And the third thing is that it is possible to build trust and do it with two ingredients. First, knowledge. Honestly, knowledge has been our way forward. And second, civic participation. That has also helped a lot. Having a bunch of people standing behind every proposal we give to government has helped a lot. So these are our main takeaways. I hope you found it interesting. I hope I can get many questions from you. I'll be delighted to answer. Ask me anything you want. I'm happy to be here, and thank you.